The former MP for Ottawa Centre, Paul Dewar, revealed today his brain tumor is terminal. When he first received his diagnosis back in February, Dewar says he went to the hospital thinking it would be an entirely different kind of outcome.
I presented myself with an emerge at the Civic and originally thought maybe it's something to do with a thrown arm, vascular problem, and then just by happenstance, I had my arm over my head for the CT scan. They picked up the tumor. And then we had an MRI done, and then they gave me the diagnosis that it was a fairly large tumor and that surgery had to happen in within 4 days, 5 days. I had awake cranial surgery, and it was after that that they said this is something we're going to send to be checked, and that's when we found out it was grade 4 glioblastoma.
Dewar spoke to CBC's Ottawa Morning today about his disease. It's the same kind of cancer that killed Gord Downie in October. Dewar had been considering a run for mayor of Ottawa, but says instead he'll spend his remaining time on youth initiatives. Here to speak more about the brain cancer glioblastoma multiforme is neurosurgeon Dr. DJ Cook. Dr. Cook performed surgery on Gord Downie. We've reached him in Wyoming, where he is attending a conference. Dr. Cook, when I heard the news of Paul Dewar had this type of cancer, of course, we all remember Gord Downie. A few years ago, Dr. Don Lowe, a prominent doctor during SARS in Ontario. It seems to me, how common is this kind of cancer?
Well, on the grand scale of things, it's a fairly rare cancer, but it affects about 3 in 100,000 people. So there'd be, around 1,000 to 1,200 cases a year in Canada. But it is the most common of the adult malignancies, and it's the most malignant of the brain tumors.
Okay, who is likely to be affected?
In general, males are more often affected, and usually between the ages of about 50 and 60 in that decade.
Okay, and many of these men were very fit men.
Absolutely. There's really no linkage between health status and the risk for glioblastoma. In fact, other than radiation and a couple very rare genetic conditions, there are no specific risk factors for glioblastoma.
Okay, so do we know the cause?
Unfortunately, we don't know the specific cause. There have been several genetic changes, which can include both mutations and silencing of specific genes that are involved in the cell cycle regulation that have been associated with the formation of the tumor, but we don't have a specific cause yet.
Okay. Is it always a death sentence?
Unfortunately, when the diagnosis is correct, the outcome is always death. There are some sporadic, rare cases where perhaps we question the original diagnosis, where people live much longer. And so we're always hopeful that that's the case for each one of our patients when this happens.
What determines how long someone will live?
Well, there are a few factors involved. One is the size and the location of the tumor at presentation, because we know that if we can remove 98% or more of the tumor that we can see on the scan prior to radiation and chemotherapy, that will extend the longevity.
What are the symptoms, Dr. Cook?
In general, patients will present with either a new neurologic symptom like weakness or trouble speaking, sometimes with a seizure, sometimes with a headache, any neurologic presentation really.
And is it one of those cancers, if you catch it, can those symptoms be alleviated if they're caught early enough?
I mean, yeah, some of those symptoms can be alleviated if they're due to pressure caused by the tumor. Then by relieving the pressure with an operation, you can relieve those symptoms. But unfortunately, with this type of tumor, it's like an anthill where the tumor itself, the mass that you see, is like the little pile of sand that the ants live in, but the ants themselves are like the cells, and they're spread everywhere throughout the brain by the time we find it. So unfortunately, in this type of tumor, despite our best efforts with surgery, chemo, and radiation, it will always come back.
Yeah, it struck me as odd that so many prominent men in such a short period of time have the same cancer.
Well, I think that previously there's been some stigma around it due to the neurologic deficits that go along with the disease. But more and more prominent people in Canada and the US, for that matter, who've been diagnosed are coming out in the public to talk about it. And I think that's why we're experiencing what feels like an increase in the number of cases.
Yeah. Is there any hope for finding a cure or an abatement of some sort of this kind of cancer?
I mean, currently there's many clinical trials running looking at different types of therapy, so different chemotherapy, immunologic therapies, and viral therapies for this disease. So there's a lot of hope. There's a huge amount of research, and I think that it's critical that we continue to support the basic research that's going to ultimately lead to a cure for this disease.
All right. Dr. DJ Cook from Kingston General Hospital joining us tonight from Wyoming. Thank you for taking time out from your evening at the conference to talk to us.
Thank you. Take care. Good night.
Good night.